that was my study. That was my, I apologize for the background noise. That was my study when at the University of Pennsylvania. My thesis begs the question: if neoliberal globalization, facilitated by structural adjustment policies, if neoliberal globalization facilitated by structural adjustment policies was the sine qua non of economic growth and development, then the Caribbean and global South countries should have experienced a level of development, a level of growth, a level of development, and a level of growth that places them further along the stages of development, because we said that economic development follows a particular stage. So the Caribbean was supposed, so the application of structural adjustment policy facilitated by and made possible by the crisis in 1970, which created, as we said that an economic problem in the Caribbean, a financial crunch, which created an opening for the technocrats and the bureaucrats of the post-industrial countries to apply conditions to a loan and to provide aid and loan tied to conditions that was supposed to be a kind of structural adjustment policies that help to restructure the Caribbean so that they can become more involved in globalization and benefit from globalization and realize growth and development. But over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, structural adjustment has not necessarily helped Jamaica and the global South countries and countries in the Caribbean. Many of these countries have become dependent capitalist nations, debt-ridden, in a sense, living from hand to mouth, so to speak, drained of the kind of capital intensive, and their markets have been opened up and penetrated and flooded. Which, we've talked about that. The book Neoliberalism, our textbook, talks about that. The challenge of structural adjustment and in the Commonwealth Caribbean by Ramesh Ramsawan talks about that. When you look at all of these books that we have, the book about globalization in the 21st century, labor, capital, and the state, they talks about that. Okay, globalization as a strategy, not necessarily to develop Caribbean nations, but to make them less competitive, which has also created other problems. I'm going to pause here because there's some work happening outside, and I don't know if you can hear me. So I'm going to pause, and then I'll come back. So give me 5 minutes. Give us about 5 minutes.
Okay.
So welcome to the class, guys. Welcome back. Welcome to Caribbean Thought. Alan. Thank you for joining us. I was talking about the film Life and Death. I mean, what you guys thought about the film. What do you think? What were your feelings, Alan? What do you thought about the film Life and Death last week?
So I've watched it before. I must say I enjoy watching those older films. But just, the progression of and even just the thought process behind some of the aspects of what was spoken about, and different persons related to politics and everything, sharing their point of view of certain aspects of Jamaica. Just seeing where we're coming from to where we are now, and I enjoy watching films like that. But yeah.
Let me ask you guys a question. I like what you just said. You said because the film is dated. It's 2001. So if I were to ask you where we are now in relation to where we are coming from, is it the film talks about what happened in the past up to the 2000s? The reality today, in terms of what's going on economically in Jamaica, socio-political in Jamaica, has there been any kind of progress as it relates to the economic conditions of Jamaicans and many Caribbean countries in terms of are we competitive? Are Jamaicans, Caribbean people still heavily dependent on aid? Those are some of the questions you want to ask yourselves. What do you guys have to say about that? When you look at if you have to look at Jamaica now, is it still the same? Has there been any progress?
It's worse.
What, Alicia? Wow, why you say that? Tell me. Why you say that? Interesting.
I think that's a Jamaica in terms of when the video was done or the movie was finished. That was
Yeah.
a Jamaica 23 years ago. And I was only on the earth for a very, very short time at that point. But
Yes.
um it was it was a kind of Jamaica. It
Hmm.
was a Jamaica where persons were more invested and seemed to be more concerned about our well-being. It was a Jamaica where my lunch money was $30 and that $30 was paper money. And when I go to school and spend my dollars I get changed, um, it was that's the best way I know how to put it. I've seen the society become unkinder as I've gotten older. I have seen it, well, maybe with the age it's that governments have either they've become more selfish as time has gone by, or I have just gotten older and become more aware and sensitive to the reality of what that selfishness looks like.
Yeah.
IMF is still very much a thing. Uh, people, so for instance, let me give an example. When you were, for instance, or in the movie when they were having conversations with the farmers or some of the women that were working in these factories, and the heart and the intention behind it is in terms of what they were doing and saying that all right, them treat we this way. But you see, if we pool our resources now, then the government can support us in this particular way and we can have our thing, we can do our thing this week, we can blah blah blah. I that was a that type of talking is very new for me in terms of hearing Jamaicans actually speak that way. Um it's more or less now the woe is me and every man for himself. I don't know if I'm making sense. I think my other classmates should chime in, but that's the best I can do. The
Yes.
worst of it is the fact that the IMF is still present. Governments have gotten worse, and the heart of people have become colder and more disinterested.
Yes. Yes.
I think though that the persons are only reacting to their circumstance and their environment.
Right.
And so
Right.
because times have just become harder, it really, like you said, become every man for themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, so I think we're saying the same thing in that regard, which for me is the show of the fact that things are are worse.
Well, I thought things were getting better economical in terms of crime and violence is down. Okay, let's start with that. Of course, we know COVID has exacerbated issues in Jamaica and the Caribbean, which affected the tourist industry. First of all, the tourist industries and the beaches, they have sold off a lot of the beaches in Jamaica and the Caribbean. So first of all, so in one sense, you said things are getting better, but in a sense, we've sold off a lot of the Caribbean have sold off a lot of their
Mhm.
resources to
Yes.
people overseas because they said that there is an inability for them to develop areas or there is a thinking on the philosophy back in the days in the 90s, 2000 probably and up to today that, well, Caribbean capitalists and businessmen, they just are not, I mean, maybe creative enough for some reason, Caribbean businessmen, they can't develop. Say, for example, they sell off Air Jamaica, which was that. To be honest, I was very upset about that. That was the pride, and because there's something about, I mean, I just thought that as an independent nation, it was something great that we had an airlines and so on. That was a pride and joy. We're moving towards first world, and we were struggling to manage the airlines, struggling to manage the electric company, struggling to mean to sell off even the utilities and make it into a monopoly. So whoever owns a utility company has a monopoly, and and then it's just quite interesting when you see if things are changing, but the fact that the beaches are being sold off, in fact, they are even cornering off, fencing off some places, some beaches and public places from certain Jamaicans to go, or Caribbean people, whatever the case is. But I mean, that's still happening. But although I heard that their export earnings is on the rise. I think it went at 33. 1 month I heard it was at 33%. But our Jamaicans, who are the Jamaicans? If Jamaica is getting better, who is benefiting? Because I said I just study when you study a society, you ask in whose interests, who are the winners and the losers, especially when you talk about living in a capitalist society that is dependent, but yet still there is a status quo, there is an elite. There are those who benefit and there are those who don't. There are those who take advantage of Jamaica's vulnerable situation. That has also created some of the problems in Jamaica, in Haiti, in many Caribbean islands. Okay, because of some locals benefit from negotiations and partnerships with external people outside of their countries, which affect Jamaica as a whole, but their pockets are filled. That's the issue of corruption. So, and this is a good segue to what I'm about to talk about today, which I wasn't going to talk about it, but since I looked the 2001 film Life, we looked at the film Life and Death last week, which talks about the Caribbean today and Jamaica and many Caribbean islands, who the result the socioeconomic conditions of the Caribbean today is a result of what we say former masters, post-industrial countries, who like the US, Canada, UK, France, Germany, these post-industrial countries, they continue their dominance over smaller, more vulnerable countries. Of course, we talk about the locations of these Caribbean islands and global south countries. They are in hurricane centers, which makes them vulnerable as well. Some Caribbean are much affected more by others. And so that's part of the issue, part of one of the problems for the Caribbean. But when you watch the film Life and Death, it would seem as if the narrator was, and the people who the narrate or the people who they brought on the film, who they showcased, they were blaming the government. Some of them were blaming the government, and of course and then at one time the government was saying, well, we couldn't do anything. You saw David Corr, you saw Michael Manley, and of course I didn't see much PNP people. I don't remember if I ever saw anybody from the Jamaica Labour Party. I didn't see Edward Seaga at the time as much, but whatever the case is, according to the Jamaican government, the 70s and 80s, their hands were tied, and even the 90s, they're going to tell you that their hands were tied. They needed the money, and they just had to acquiesce to the international regime, to the people to the lenders. They had to acquiesce. They had to apply the changes in order for them to get the money. There are those who say, well, they're just greedy. They just wanted the money. Okay, fine. So, but whatever the case is, when you watch the film, there are people in Jamaica who blame the government. And of course, there's one particular instance where this very erudite gentleman, learned gentleman, a farmer though, said the Jamaican government were weak-kneed and lack vision. They were weak-kneed and they lack vision. And they weren't thinking out of the box. They were weak-kneed and lack vision. And that's one of the criticism I have levied against the Caribbean governments, the fact that they are weak, and of course driven by aid and so on and so forth. But anyway, irrespective of the fact that Jamaica and the Caribbean countries were affected or by in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s by the oil crisis, which created the structural adjustment policies, which has helped to weaken their economies or made them less competitive, which creates socioeconomic policies even up to today. There are those, and the film might blame the government, but in their defense, they say, well, it's not us, but there are people who blame the government, who say, well, I mean, sorry, but the film as a whole, though, really blame the IMF, the World Bank, the WTO, Bill Clinton, okay, the film, Life and Death. It really places blame squarely on majority of the blame. Okay, so some Jamaicans blame the government and majority of the people blame the IMF and the World Bank and so on and so forth. The economists, the professionals, and the academics, they blame the IMF, the World Bank, post-industrial countries, and unfair strategies. But to be fair, there are those who level an attack against the government, saying that they were weak-kneed and lacked vision. But not only were they weak-kneed and lacked vision, the fact is, Caribbean countries like Jamaica, many Caribbean islands, have benefited from tremendous amount of investment and foreign aid. They've gotten a lot of money through, okay, they have gotten a lot of loan as well. Fine, they got the loans. But what have we done with the loan? What did the governments do with the loan? In the 80s, I think, or the 90s, the Jamaican government got a lot of foreign aid, especially towards education. What did they do with that? So we blame them, we blame the international regime, but at the same time, we have benefited from loans, from aid, from investments. What has been the result of that? And then when you start to talk about corruption, hold on a sec, guys. Give me a second. So who is to be blamed for the character? When you watch the film Life and Death, in a sense, they're blaming in a sense, most of the blame is really on the international community and the unsuspecting tourists or the people from the post-industrial countries. The post-industrial country, the IMF, the World Bank, that's to be blamed. However, I wrote an article, Corruption in Jamaica, who's to be blamed for the Caribbean's demise? Because if when you watch the film, there are those who say they were weak-kneed and lack vision, but there are those who say corruption among many black and brown nations and developing countries, emerging economies, when you used to look at the corruption index, corruption is the highest among countries of the global south or Caribbean countries or black and brown countries. When you talk about what's going on in Haiti today, one of the things that Father Iverson alluded to, and many pundits and scholars who study Haiti would tell you that, of course, part of the corruption is so high and rampant in some of these African countries or former colonized countries and black and brown peoples in the communities. The corruption is so high, or in Jamaica they call it banduluism, making side deals, and in some cultures and some customs, it's become a normal part of society. That's why they call about the corruption perception index. First of all, what's the perception of corruption in Jamaica? I mean, and there are those who might say, okay, corruption is not high because of how people define corruption and because of how people's understanding of corruption. And so there are people who are engaged in corrupt practices but don't think that it is corrupt because their perception and understanding of corruption has been thwarted because of limited exposure, because of greed, or because of the system. But we talk about corruption in the police force, corruption, but systems all over the world is corrupt. But corruption has an index. There's a level to corruption. And I'm going to tell you what the corruption index is in Jamaica in a second. But there was an article in the NeoLiberal.com entitled Corruption in Jamaica, Who is to be Blamed for the Caribbean's Demise. There's been much talk about corruption in Jamaica with the rise of the white-collar crimes or theft in Jamaica. And recently, Janine Janie McKeown submitted a letter to the Gleaner, which was the letter of the day on January 18, 2020, defining white-collar crimes from a sociological perspective as a product of the societal and cultural norms that shape the behavior of individuals and organizations. Let me open my screen. Individuals and organizations. Again, there's been much talk about corruption in Jamaica with the rise of the white-collar crimes or theft in Jamaica. Recently, Janie McKeown submitted a letter to the Gleaner, which was the letter of the day on January 18, defining white-collar crimes from a sociological perspective as a product of the societal and cultural norms that shape the behavior of individuals and organizations. Jamaica, like many developing countries, has a culture of corruption that is deeply ingrained in its society. This culture of corruption can be seen in the widespread acceptance of bribes, embezzlement, and other forms of white-collar crimes as a normal part of doing business. In fact, let me read Miss McCowan's article. If I can find it. If I can find it, here it is. Miss McCarron's article is at the Jamaica Gleaner, letter of the day, the impact of white-collar crimes on Jamaica. Where is it? And I found the article just now. Here we go. It says, letter of the day. Dear editor, madam, white-collar crime, also known as corporate crime, refers to non-violent crimes committed by individuals or organizations in the course of their business or professional activities. From a sociological perspective, white-collar crimes can be understood as a product of the societal and cultural norms that shape the behavior of individual organizations. Now, Jamaica, like many developing countries, has a culture of corruption that is deeply ingrained in its society. The culture of corruption can be seen in the widespread acceptance of bribes and embezzlement and other forms of white-collar crime as a normal part of doing business. The impact of white-collar crime on Jamaica are significant and far-reaching. It undermines the rule of law, erodes public trust in government and institutions, and stifles economic growth. Now, white-collar crime also has a disproportionate impact on the poor and vulnerable members of society, who are often the victims of fraud and other financial crimes. One of the most damaging impacts of white-collar crime in Jamaica is the loss of foreign investment and economic development. So again, one of the most damaging impacts of white-collar crime in Jamaica is the loss of foreign investment and economic development. Now, the country's reputation for corruption and white-collar crimes make it a less attractive destination for foreign investment, which is crucial for the country's economic growth and development. Additionally, it also affects the country's reputation internationally, which can lead to sanctions and other penalties imposed by foreign governments and international organizations. In conclusion, white-collar crime is a serious problem in Jamaica that has significant negative impacts on the country. It is important for the government and society as a whole to address the root causes of white-collar crime, including the culture of corruption that exists in Jamaica, in order to combat the problem and promote economic development and social justice. So that's an article in the Jamaica Gleaner some time ago about which I referenced in an article and a lecture that I did 2 semesters ago. Now, there is a film about corruption. There is a website that looks at the corruption perception index, which is updated regularly, and you can actually look at what the corruption perception. I'll give you what this is called, the CPI. I'll share you. I'm actually going to forward you the link, but it's the Consumer Perception Index. The National Integrity Agency is part of that, as well as part of the community and the organization internationally that helps to monitor corruption. And NIA focuses on the Jamaica and probably, and some extent, the Caribbean. Now, there are 3 students, Tyrese Sanshea and Sasha Gay Robinson, in a group. They were in a group and they submitted a brief essay on corruption in Jamaica by reviewing the film Cost of Corruption, which is a 2011 documentary film by the National Integrity Agency, hosted by the executive producer, Professor Trevor Monroe of the University of West Indies, or formerly of UWI. I don't know if he's still there. But um, according to the to to the to the to the video, or to the production, or to the NIA, we made, and to the students, um, and their understanding of the film and their research on corruption in Jamaica. According to them, they say that we may blame Jamaica's stagnation on the neoliberal regime of the Washington Consensus. But Trevor Monroe agrees, and also places blame on the corrupt politicians and leaders. In fact, Jamaica Gleaner reported a story on crooked politicians on UK radar, reporting that the former UK ambassador to Jamaica had found widespread levels of corruption within Jamaica, within the government. Now, the budding and young academics who are developing their ideas and ability to command and formulate opinions around current issues in the Caribbean within its post-colonial past began their commentary with a bold statement from the film about corruption in Jamaica. And I quote, "The politicians are more interested in getting in and staying in power than they are in delivering on the promises that Jamaicans need." The Cost of Corruption, which is a 2020 film. Now, the documentary is one that highlights corruption at its highest in Jamaican society. This film was used to portray barriers that are preventing Jamaica from reaching its potential of prosperity that in the late 50s and 60s was in close proximity to develop to being a developed society on the right path to growth on par with Singapore. The students wrote that corruption certainly didn't start here on our island paradise. However, over the years, it has certainly found a home. In fact, it has been among us for so long that it's openly accepted and ignored by the majority of the population. As seen in the film, not only the experts, but the commentators have stated that both government systems are corrupted. Imagine politicians taking from the society that you have sworn to serve and build. Would the Jamaican society be how it is today if those $9.5 million was not misused, so on and so forth? I'm going to actually have you watch the film by the NIA right now, and then I'm going to give you some stats as it relates to where Jamaica and the Caribbean is on the corruption perception index. Because as I said to you, there is a corruption perception index that measures the corruption perception in each country, and there is a list of over 100 countries, and many Caribbean countries, some Caribbean countries at the bottom, many black and brown countries, developing countries. I think Bahamas is doing very well. But we look at the corruption index after we've looked at this 2012 corruption, this film by the NIA talking about corruption, which also puts into perspective why Jamaica and the Caribbean is where they are today. Not just because of the IMF, not just because of the World Bank or WTO, and not just because the government was weak, need, and lacked vision, but also because of governmental greed and mismanagement. We're going to talk about that, okay? And we're going to talk about what the corruption in Jamaica is today, and I'll give you the numbers. So we're going to do that right now. We're going to take a quick 5 minutes break. So I can I need to close out some of these windows because I don't want to create an interference. And then when you come back in 5 minutes, we're going to watch the film. It's not long. It's just 19. It's 1 hour. It's 1 hour. So I'm gonna give you 5 minutes to stretch your legs, get your mind ready. When you come back, it's a dated film from 2012, but it's very important because since you watch we're talking about the Caribbean being an invention today. What are we going to be tomorrow? So it's very important that we study the realities of the Caribbean, where we are today, so that we learn from the past, because it will inform the future. And of course, we want to explore what progress have we made? Where are we in terms of corruption perception index? So this film is very powerful documentary, very powerful, and by the NIA, and it's not just a situation that occurs in Jamaica, but in almost all Caribbean countries, the issue of corruption. And as I said to you, Life was a film about Antigua, but a film based on a book written about Antigua. But you take that film and you just switch the name to Jamaica, it's almost the same experiences. Okay, same experience. So what we will do now, you watch a film that talks about Jamaica, but I'm going to tell you the questions that the film is asking of as it relates to mismanagement and waste. Those very same questions appear in almost all developing countries, Trinidad, Barbados, so on and so forth. Okay, so take a 5 minutes break. We come back in at 5:03. By the way, I am premiering a video, a short 10 minutes trailer later on this evening at around 6. So at 6 o'clock, I want to take a break and have you guys watch that premiere with me because it's about Trinidad. What is Trinidad? Do you guys know what Trinidad is? What is Trinidad, guys? What's Trinidad? Do you guys know what Trinidad is?
Not a clue, sir.
Does who can tell me what Trinidad is? Who can tell me what that is? Gavion? Alan?
Trinidad, sir?
Yeah, don't Google it. Don't Google it. Okay.
Sir, I don't know what it means. How am I supposed to explain if I don't know what it means?
Great. So take a break. We come back. We watch Corruption, and then at 6 o'clock, we can all watch that a quick 10 minute film together that looks at Trinidad. Okay. All right. All right. We take a quick 5 minutes break. Okay. But you guys can look. I mean, don't Google it, please. But ask around anybody that knows. I mean, if you have anybody around you right now, ask them to know what Trinidad is. Okay. But we'll give you the answer later on. We'll be right back. 5 minutes. We come back at 5:07. Okay. Okay.
Me and her like this.
Okay.
So when I met Shelly when I was a young lad,
Yeah.
she saw I had a passion.
Yeah.
I ended up looking at Philip Martin. I came and told her about it. Say, oh, I know them long time.
Yeah.
So then she took me back to the studio because it wasn't taking me serious as a Trini artist.
Yes.
The Trini artist back in them times.
I understand that some of you weren't hearing the sound. I understand that some of you weren't hearing the sound, right? Oh, you said barely? Oh, I didn't.
It was loud initially, and then the second time around there was no sound. And then when he asked the question, like there was only like a little bit of sound.
Yeah, the problem is I have to press this thing, and sometimes when you press it, I don't know if pressing it, I'm clicking it off or clicking it on. Unless you guys tell me you're not hearing it, I don't know. I hear everything, but if you don't tell me that if you guys don't, because I can't see, I can't tell. I know I have a it has this thing that says share sound, but when you click on it, it does not. I don't know if it's supposed to be highlighted or whatever. But anyways, I think you get the picture. Trinidad, and he talks about he's a Trinidadian artist, lives in Philadelphia. He's a Trinidadian dancehall artist. And I am getting to understand that Trinidad is Trinidadian dancehall music, which is taking the world by storm. I understand. So Trinidad have their own version of reggae or dancehall. So I actually did a poll. What is Trinidad music? Is it calypso music? Is it Jamaican music, reggae dance, or is it Trinidadian dancehall? Of course, it's Trinidadian dancehall music. So Trinidad is a new musical genre that's developed in the Caribbean. That's developed in the Caribbean in Trinidad. But it is a ver but it is but it's a version of Jamaican dancehall music. So it's a version of Jamaican dancehall music. But you know, a lot of music today, new music today, gets get get their inspiration from other genres, other older genres of music. So that's very interesting to note. So that's what's in it. And I wanted to share that with you since we're doing Caribbean Thought to let you guys know what's going on in terms of new music. So, and I think we just celebrated Reggae Month about like that was February. But in terms of looking at music, we know about dancehall, reggae, calypso, but this new music on the rise now is Trinidad. So now you guys have that information. The new Trinidadian dancehall music, and to see how the music in the Caribbean how each Caribbean island, how we influence each other and we develop our own version of that. So Jamaica, you know, Jamaican carnival, you have Trinidadian carnival, and so on. But it's quite interesting and he sounds really good. So you can check out. I'm gonna have a discussion with him because he's also an Israeli priest. He's an Israelite. And he provides an interesting history as it relates to black Israelites. Who are the black Israelites? Where are they? You know, and actually we talked at least for about 30 minutes to 45 minutes talking about this this new sorry, it's not new, this religious group of black Israelis, and he's actually a priest or a rabbi or whatever you call it, one of the spiritual leaders of the faith. And so it's quite interesting. I told him I wanted him to come and talk to the class a little bit, give us and talk a little bit about the history of his group. And he's Caribbean, so it's quite interesting. Quite interesting. But I wanted to share that with you quickly as it relates to as a break, well, not as a break, just some quick information for you guys to know, which is really good. I'm going to finish. What I want to do now is I want to go back to the video we were watching, finish it quickly, because it wraps up. The video is available on the NIA video it's called The Cost of Corruption. That's available on YouTube. It's also available if you go to to my channel and click on Caribbean Thought or Pan-African and Caribbean Thought. That's available on the Caribbean. It's available. Or you just go into YouTube and just type in cost of corruption. It's going to be available. But I'm going to finish it for you guys quickly. We're going to play it. Only 5 minutes is left, and then we wrap up. Okay. But guys, so you understand. By the way, so you know what Trinidad is now, right? You guys, you know what Trinidad is now. Yes. All right, we're gonna wrap up this final class.
Jamaica's long march to nationhood began.
I'm sorry, I don't know what happened, but I apologize, guys. Let me stop share real quickly and go back to the video that we were watching real quickly. I don't know what happened. There we go. This is all
through the island and abroad. So the wealth and the protection that they get from the party insulates them and affords them this degree of impunity, if you wish. The evidence that is available to us suggests that Coke's organization was well prepared. Right? This was a place that was highly equipped to deliver violence. As I recall it, the community was highly mobilized many weeks before the operation with an elaborate system of lookouts and guards and so forth. One estimate that a professional brought to my attention was that perhaps maybe as many as 400 persons were involved in the defense of Coke, the defense of Tivoli, and I mean armed defense now. Mop-up operations following on Coke's arrest. So, as I recall it, almost 100 weapons were found, including 45 rifles, a number of explosive devices, grenades, 50 caliber shells, pretty sophisticated stuff. I believe that the Jamaican government eventually agreed to sign the extradition order because there was a confluence, if you wish, a convergence of pressures from two sources, one external, one internal. The external pressures were relentless and came from the U.S. administration, which is very powerful. U.S. is a very powerful country in the world. There was also considerable internal pressure. Internal pressure from the opposition political party, which is bad enough for any political administration, but equally importantly, pressure from civil society. There was the partnership, which involved the PSOJ, represented employers, it involved the unions, and it involved other elements of civil society. And the partners at that point during the Dudus crisis, I believe, stopped attending the meetings and signaled to government that if you wanted this collaboration to continue, then you would have to sign the extradition order. Also, there were elements of civil society outside of the partnership that clearly expressed their opinions and demanded that the government sign the extradition request. And I believe that these pressures came from these organizations and from public opinion because people were well aware of the corrupt relationship between Coke and elements in the administration. So these two things combined, I believe, forced the administration to sign the request.
The consequences of corruption in the Dudus case were that the link between politics and organized crime was clearly revealed. There was a stranglehold of dons over community life, no freedom of speech or movement because of violent intimidation of citizens, resulting in a serious fall in Jamaica's international standing.
What the Coke extradition, conviction and sentencing demonstrates more than anything else is no matter how strong the political connections, no matter the level and length of political corruption, the Jamaican people, the Jamaican authorities, in association with our development partners, can defeat political corruption and political crime. But for this to be done, national integrity action supports what Jamaica requires: robust laws and law enforcement to outlaw political intimidation in any community, to outlaw gangs and gangsterism, and to hold culpable those who are connected to the gangs and facilitating gangsterism. It requires community renewal to empower the people in inner city communities. But most of all, Jamaica requires each and every citizen to speak out, to have their voices heard. Were that not the case in the Coke extradition, the government would not have been forced to reverse its position, to extradite Coke, and to ensure that organized crime suffered this major defeat.
I think the government, they can create more open doors for people to be more innovative, because you have persons on the streets who are not fully occupied in what they do.
If the people who we are looking up to and who we have voted in to lead us do not do and are the right thing and are not accountable, why should anybody else be accountable?
So me as a Jamaican, I stay straight. Me I try to curve my thing, me I try to put it in my youth them, for curve it, and me I try my best. I know me alone can do it, but me still I do my part.
So we need some intelligence, and within intelligence we need a sort of philosophical idea that is continued and perpetuated in the media, because this is where the youth them latch on to know information.
Also, if they get something for the children them to do, it will help to cut down the crime in the country.
Now that you have heard from our experts and from the commentators how much corruption is costing Jamaica, how much it is holding us back from building on our immense achievements, where do we go from here? I can tell you where NIA is going. We are going to continue building awareness through films like this one, through town hall meetings where we hear from you. We're going to be continuing to insist on urgent passage of campaign finance reform legislation and the establishment of a single anti-corruption commission. But NIA alone cannot do it. We need the help of our international partners to ensure that the taxes which their taxpayers pay in order to help us here in Jamaica reach the target. But most of all, we need the help of each and every one of you. Get involved with NIA. Call our office to report whatever you see that looks corrupt. You be a watchdog. Be a searchlight. Visit our website. Help us to make Jamaica the place of choice, to live, to work, to raise families and to do business, so that sooner more than later we get the Jamaica that we are capable of achieving with the talent of our people.
And medias like this need to send out information properly and don't edit out everything we say. Yeah, that's
The following are excerpts from messages to NIA published in NIA's first anniversary supplement from the Governor General, the Prime Minister, and the Leader of the Opposition of Jamaica.
I unequivocally support the urgent message of the NIA and every one of us to close ranks against corruption.
All right. I think that's a good place to end. That's a very good place to end. You have a responsibility. We have a responsibility. And I've oftentimes said that we have a responsibility to hold our government accountable and responsible. If we practice political tribalism, if we are nepotistic and practice connectionism, then we will fail as a country. The Caribbean as a place and as peoples will fail. And I said to you, you know, because of where the Caribbean is and the fact that we are part of a global world, and the Caribbean, in much of the Caribbean islands are new nations, and they are at a certain stage in the economic development. They can, you know, corruption cannot be high. We have a responsibility to protect our interests. We have a responsibility as Jamaicans, as Caribbean nations, as Black and brown people. We have a responsibility to hold our leaders responsible and to ensure that the country is and the resources are being managed properly. So, and you hear that at the end, it's not just government legislation that must help to create a better Jamaica, a better Caribbean. The Jamaican people have a responsibility as well to do that. And that is why we have to expose ourselves to information. That's why we have to think critically. And courses like this, Caribbean Thought, it's very important, okay? Because it helps to facilitate it. And of course, and sometimes, I mean, in this course, I may say some things that may sound very you might say, oh, that's anti-Christian. It's not necessarily anti-Christian or anti-religious, but the question we have to ask, we have to challenge ourselves. And to do that, we have to look ourselves in the mirror sometimes, and we have to ask ourselves some questions. You know, you have to be very open of yourself, open of your leaders, okay? And you have to be able to challenge them. You have to be willing to read and to explore. And I said to people, even people within churches, within institutions, as if the institutions tie your hands down, preventing you from exploring, from reading, from going outside of the institution, because institutions want to continue to dominate and to create hegemony over the nothing is, and I believe it's very important as leaders, as people in communities and institutions, to allow our people to explore and to learn and to develop. That's the only way we can get better as a people and as a society. Okay. And anyways, but I hope that you appreciate that video. Jamaica's corruption index has improved, and slightly. We are still below 50. Majority of the Caribbean islands are below 50. Only probably 2 Caribbean islands that's above the 50 mark. The majority of the Caribbean islands are below 50, and there's a lot of work to be done. I know Jamaica has been leading the charge in terms of a framework and training other Caribbean countries, and the kind of policy in the OECD, Organization of Emerging and Caribbean and Developing States. Jamaica, the NIA actually has achieved some of its goals in terms of getting the government to start put into law some kind of legislation that protect against corruption and abuse of power. So the NIA has now been enshrined into law, and they are part of a wider organization, and there's collaboration internationally between countries via this non-profit organization. And you have access to the website now. You can go in, type in information. You can see where Jamaica is in relation to other countries. You can learn more about how to identify, how to be a whistleblower in terms of the fight against corruption. You see what corruption can do in terms of the economic development of a country. So, and as college students who are exposed to this kind of resources, to whom much is given, much is required, you have a responsibility now to take what you have learned into your communities, into your workplaces, into your churches, and so on, and to facilitate the discussions, and also which also help. You know, when governments know that the citizenry are aware of what's going on in the world and what they're doing, that's a problem for them. And so sometimes it's in their onus for you guys not to know. But I'm telling you, as academics, you are at a place where you have a responsibility to go and share the information with your countrymen, okay? Empower them and also hold them accountable. And the other day I said, you know, I said to somebody recently about the church. We have the church. We have become so political. that our political connections prevent us from being true prophets, and prophets are challenge leaders of the day. We can't even challenge. Leaders are supposed to look to the church and to look to the prophets and the religious leaders and the philosophers for guidance, but the religious leaders and the institutions, they're so politically connected to leaders and so on today, and that they're not holding them accountable, holding leaders accountable. The leaders seem to be guiding and leading the way. We have a responsibility to rediscover the human conscience. Okay, and I hope that this particular class today will shed a little bit more light about corruption and how the resources available and how we can be responsible citizens to ensuring that we root out corruption in the world. Thank you guys for being part of this class. Thank you. Next week we have the final class. Look out for a quiz I will send to you which mirrors the exam. It's going to look almost like the exam. I will send it to you. I'm going to ask you guys to try and complete it. When you come back to class next week, we're going to discuss the quiz. And I'm going to send you the quizzes. I completed the quiz. I'm going to adjust it a little bit. I'm going to send it to you, Alicia, or one of you guys. Just call them. Sometimes I'm very busy. Just call and remind me to send you guys the quiz. I'm going to send you the quiz and just peruse it. See if you can answer the questions when we come to class next week. We will spend some time to review the quiz and to wrap up the class by looking at the timeline. There's a timeline list, some thinkers that I need to share with you as well. And ensure that you're ready for the exams and so on. But that's about it for class today, guys, and I wish you all the best. Okay?
Okay, sir. Same to you. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, man. Take care. Bye-bye.